Hi again. So what I want to mention is that in that course, in our graphical interface, we're going to cover pretty much everything. As you can see, I have connected via my external interface, and it's just way easier for me. So, but remember, you can connect to your device using various ports that you have set up, as long as you have GUI access enabled. I mean HTTP, HTTPS access if you are able to access that from the browser. Remember how to do that, it's in our CLI. So over here I want to talk about the firewall policy, and most people would consider that as the most important topic in the firewall. This is probably the case because we need to allow access or deny access based on the destination, based on the IP address, on the user. There are a lot of options that you can choose from, but so we're gonna start with that, and a lot of stuff to cover, a lot of modules, a lot of tabs that we see to the left of the screen, and we're gonna talk about all of them, pretty much about all of them one by one. And the very first thing I want to start with is the firewall policy. So where you need to go is click policy and objects and then go for firewall policy. So what we have here is all the rules that allow traffic based on the source and destination. Over here we can also see the ports from where the traffic is going and to what port is forwarded to. So what we're gonna do, we can create a new rule. If you don't have any rules, it's your new setup, just click create new. I'm gonna click edit, but you're gonna see the same screen. And over here, let's talk about various options and what you need to do. The first bar that we have is called name, and in name you just give a name for the rule and what it is going to do. And my rule will give me access for the internet. So I'm gonna call it internet access. Remember the Windows machine that we have in our topology that is directly connected to my firewall, and then it will go out for the internet. So I will use that to go to the internet. We're gonna call it internet access. The incoming interface is port 2. Port 2 is where my Windows machine is connected. This is where the traffic first enters the device, enters the firewall. So in the incoming interface, I'm choosing my port 2. I'm going to attach the topology in the topology lecture so it's more clear to you with the visual representation. In the outgoing interface, you choose your external interface, the interface that faces the internet, that is going to the internet directly. So over here, what I have is SD-WAN outside, and this is basically the aggregation of several links that are connected to the internet. I have a bunch of links, so it's port 1 and another port, which I connect to the internet, and I can integrate that into one interface. But for now, you can choose port 1 if you're using that as the external interface. I have a whole section prepared for you in regards to SD-WAN, and we're going to talk about that. It's a great technology. It's really fun to work with. I think you're going to like it. So once you actually create SD-WAN aggregated link, you're not able to use your one external interface anymore because it is used in the SD-WAN name, so it's contained there. So what you have to do is just choose your external interface in the outgoing interface. In the source bar, we can choose the IP address of a device for which we are creating a rule where the traffic is generated, or we can enable a whole network. We can put a network, we can put a specific IP address, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna actually show you in a bit more detail after I go through all the options here. In destination, we choose where we wanna go. It can be all if we're going for the internet, or it can be a specific address. We can choose a specific address, right? So even if it's on the internet, if we know the IP address, we just putting the address where the traffic is dedicated. If the traffic is dedicated specifically for that address, the traffic will be allowed. The next bar we have here is called schedule, and it means we can select the schedule when that firewall rule will be applied. I'm going to show you in a bit more detail after. So as for the service, we can choose a specific service like TCP, UDP, or something else that we want to allow or deny. So then we have the action. We want to either accept it or deny it. Alright, and the inspection mode is something a little bit more complex to explain right away, but anyway, let me give it a shot. So we have a flow-based and proxy-based. For the most part, you will be working with the flow-based because it's more of a contemporary way to do that, more modern way to do things. So for the most part, that bar is related to security modules and how they work. So if you choose flow-based, it means your security modules like antivirus, IPS, they will check the traffic on the fly. While the traffic is going, it will be able to check it. In proxy base, it works like a proxy, so it holds the session on your firewall and it will not let it through until the traffic is inspected. So it's like a really raw and rough explanation of that, but some of the features will work in proxy based and some features will not work there, and we're gonna talk about that when we work with security modules like antivirus. Security modules, or can also call them security profiles, as Fortinet describes it. So we're gonna talk about that while we work with them. So the next thing over here, as we can see in the firewall network option, is NAT. We can either enable NAT or disable. What it means, speaking the normal language, remember we have source NAT, like many to one NAT, right? So if we want to translate a lot of addresses to one address, this is where we do that. We don't have a separate tab for that. We can enable that, by the way, but it's a little bit more advanced. The traditional way to select NAT in a Fortinet environment is to do that in our rule, in our firewall rule. And some people who work with other vendors might actually find that confusing, but believe me, it's really unique and useful. And honestly, that feature by far the best I've seen comparing to other vendors. It's the most convenient way to work with NAT. So you just enable that over here. If I do that here, you can see my incoming interface is my internal interface and the outgoing interface is my external interface that is facing the internet. If I select NAT here and over here, you can see use outgoing interface address, right? So what's going to happen is I'm going to use the external interface as my kind of like the interface that actually leaves the firewall. So let's say the internal address is 172.16.10.2 and I'm going to the internet, so it will take the external interface address and add a random port and will associate that with my internal address. So once the traffic leaves the internet, I will have the external IP address of my firewall that is routable on the internet. So this is how easy it is set up here. So you don't need anything else. You don't need to manually type in the IP address. You just click enable NAT and there you go. You are able to access the internet right away. Alright, let me show you some of the parameters that we can choose from. In the incoming interface, a bunch of interfaces you can choose from. I'm choosing port 2. As I explained, this is my internal interface, my incoming interface. As the outgoing interface, you can see the members are port 1 and port 5. Depending on your topology, you have to choose your external interface that is facing the internet. As my source, over here you can add the address or a specific user that you want to allow access to. So in my address, you have to create your address, specific IP address, or a network. You have to create that object in a database of Fortinet. So in order to do that, you have to click create over here and then type in the IP address and you will have Windows local machine as I have here. It can be a specific IP address, just one address as I have here, Windows local machine, or you can specify a whole subnet. Doesn't matter, really. Depends on the rule that you want to create. As destination, we're going to leave as old, but the whole idea is the same. So if you need a specific rule, you need to create that using a create bar. I'm going to leave it as old because this is how you would do that if you're trying to connect to the internet. Moving on to schedule, and in schedule you have to create your schedule as well. You're going to click create and let's go for reoccurring schedule. So recurring schedule. So over here, I'm choosing the dates when the policy will be applied. You can also choose the time when the policy will work. So I'm choosing Monday, Thursday. You can choose all day, depending on what you have. You just click it here, and this is when the policy will be activated. You can choose the color as well for that, and then you can choose it. If you don't see it right away, you have to refresh your page, and then you will be able to see that the object has been added to the database. Usually it's right there right away, but you know, glitches exist everywhere, so you can choose a late night policy, the one that we have created in the database. So in the service, you can choose a specific service like TCP, IP, SSH, doesn't matter. A lot of them, you can specify a specific range, the one you the one that you have in mind that you want to block. Everything is pretty much granular over here. If you scroll down, you know, below the firewall netting tab, you can see what is called security profiles, which you can access from here. So let me talk about that a little. All the profiles that you see here is antivirus, web filter, video filter, DNS filter, application control, IPS file filter, and we're gonna talk about each module later on in other lectures. But the thing is, you are able to select and activate a specific security profile, security module on that firewall rule specifically. So my Windows 10 machine is trying to access the internet. I want to enable, let's say, antivirus. So apart from just allowing the traffic based on the IP address, I will be able to block it, and if the connection is corrupted, maybe, you know, I'm trying to download a virus. So if I enable an antivirus here, I am specifically saying, hey, firewall device, I want you to check it against the antivirus signatures. I want to check if there are any viruses here, and I'm only allowing that for that specific firewall rule. For now, we will disable all security profiles. You don't need anything enabled here. We're gonna work with that later. I'm gonna show you in great detail each of the parameters that we have here. So for now, we're gonna click OK, and then move to the next lesson.